and the admissions team here at Flatiron School. I'll be happy to answer questions at the end of the session. I'll be happy to answer questions in the chat as well. I'm going to drop in a email address for myself and a link to book phone calls. If you have questions during the session, certainly engage with me, or afterwards, you can book a phone call or email me. But yeah, I'm happy to introduce Josh, who's going to take us away on our product design journey today. Take it away, Josh.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate you. And again, appreciate all of you for joining us, taking time out of your workday. Maybe it's your vacation, whatever it is. We don't take that for granted, that you're all busy. And so thank you all for joining us. Hopefully you get something out of our presentation today, where we're talking about playful design. Now, this is a series of webinars where, as a designer, I seek inspiration from outside of the domain of UI and UX design. And I do that in order to find new ideas, new principles that I can then bring back into my design work. So if you've attended some of these before, previous webinars, we've explored the ideas behind musical rhythms and scales and how those can be applied to user interface design. In another event, we found inspiration in board game design and designing user experience in tabletop board games. And in another event, we explored how different models and frameworks can help us, whether we're designers or not, to explore nested problems in complex spaces. Now, you don't have to be a designer to enjoy and get something from this series. So even if you're not a practicing designer, I challenge you to use some of these ideas we're going to talk about and bring it back into your own work. As Michael introduced me, I am Joshua Robinson. I'm the director of the product design program here at Flatiron School. I've been designing now for over a decade, and I've been teaching design and helping students land jobs in the design industry for about 6 years. Previously, I worked at an ad technology and marketing company named Centro. And then I also worked at the UX Design Bootcamp designation. Now at Flatiron, I oversee the curriculum and the instruction, and I ensure that our students are well prepared to start a job search in the design industry. As Michael said, if you're interested in hearing more about Flatiron School and our program, please do let us know in the chat. I'm sure Michael or one of the admissions reps will get in touch with you, schedule some time to go through the program. We also have really good product design info sessions that we run about once a month, where you can get a longer overview of the program and what that whole experience is. Again, I see most of you are using the chat just fine to interact with me. I'll be checking the chat occasionally. So this is a informal, laid-back series. I like to have conversations with you. So use that chat and respond to what I'm talking about. Give me your own ideas. Or even if you disagree with something, I'd love to know about it so that we can pause and chat about it. I like to learn through these sessions as well, okay? So use that chat if you like. And absolutely, I see that some of you are connecting with each other on LinkedIn. Please do that. We have such a great community around the product design program here at Flatiron School. So I'd love to connect with you as well. There's a live transcription that is currently running right now. So if you look down at the bottom of the bar and you would like it, you can tap CC and you'll get a live transcription as we go. And if there's any other questions, let me know. John, yes, the previous webinars are available for viewing. What I will try to do is get a link out. When we send the link to this recording, we can probably link out to the rest of the sessions as well. Okay, let's jump right into it. There's really two essential questions I'm exploring during this session with you. I want to find out what it means for an activity to be considered fun. I asked, what are some of the characteristics, what are some of the qualities that should be present for an activity to be considered fun? Now, fun is one of those things that everyone thinks that they know and they understand and they recognize until you start trying to define it. If I asked you to define fun, you probably come up with some of the things that we're talking about today. but I'm coming at it from a slightly different angle as I'm looking for inspiration to bring back into my design world. Gamification, absolutely. There are aspects of gamification that can be used for good, for motivation, for curiosity, but there's also gamification that can be used for bad, right? To hook people into bad habits. The most obvious example would be the gambling dopamine loop, right? As you pull that lever, you keep getting dopamine hits. So gamification is one of those things that it's good to know about user psychology and to use some of that in your UX design work. But as long as you are doing a good ethical audit and you understand the impact that your gamification efforts are having. Okay, so when we're looking at the qualities of a fun activity, again, I asked myself this question and I kind of came up with some vague answers, but then I started doing a little desktop research, talking to some other people, some other designers about what they considered fun. And here's what I landed on as a rough guide. This isn't a theory of fun, okay? This isn't an expert's view about what makes an activity fun. This is just a novice's guide that I am going to use in my own work. And then you may find some things to use as well. So fun activities are usually going to contain one or more of these different qualities: challenge, novelty, but also patterns, social interaction, immersion, feedback and rewards, and playfulness. So these 6 things give me a starting basis for understanding why certain activities or experiences can evoke positive emotions. I saw someone say a sense of playfulness, absolutely. Engagement or an experience that applies to your senses creates appeal, intrigue, curiosity. Yeah, I love that answer. And I love those words, intrigue, curiosity. So we don't have a single universally accepted theory of fun, but you see these factors in common and they can be recognized out in the wild as contributing to this experience of fun. So let's talk about that first one. And I'm going to probably spend the most amount of time on the first 2 because I kind of got down a rabbit hole with some of this. So let's talk about challenge. So challenge can come in many different forms, and it's also context specific, right? Challenge is going to be specific to you. What's challenging to me might not necessarily be challenging to you or the next person on the Zoom call. But there are some general characteristics that contribute to this experience of fun and that draws us in and engages us. So fun is going to involve an appropriate level of difficulty or challenge. It needs to engage our skills. It needs to push us to improve, but it doesn't need to overwhelm us. When I look at this picture of the game Go, it overwhelms me. I am probably not going to go learn how to play this game because I am already overwhelmed because I don't know the patterns. I don't know the rules of engagement, the rules of play yet, right? So there's a barrier that is too much for me right now to overcome learning the rules of Go. Roger said overstimulated by sight. Absolutely. So when we are thinking about fun, we're thinking about the right balance between challenge and my current skill. This is crucial for maintaining interest. I need to be interested, curious, as someone said, and I also need a sense of accomplishment. I need to know what it gets me. Can I do something useful, right? Can I overcome this challenge? It has to be attainable. That's the word I think I'm casting about for. The challenge needs to be attainable and useful. So this balance between skill and difficulty. The key aspect of a challenge is finding that balance between the difficulty of the task and the current skill level. So we're looking for a challenge that's well matched to my abilities or to an individual's abilities. And what does this do? It creates a sense of flow. Some of you may have heard that term before. You're in a flow state, which is a mental state where you become fully immersed in an activity. You might lose track of time. You might experience a deep sense of satisfaction. Can anyone relate to that deep sense of flow, like losing yourself in an activity? I don't know about you all, but for me, when I find myself in a flow state, it tends to be some type of challenging activity that I'm working towards a goal. I don't normally get in a flow state where I'm just doing a mindless activity, where I'm not even thinking about it, right? To get into a flow state, you need to exert some kind of effort to get that deep sense of satisfaction. Okay, so if the task is too easy, we get bored. Too difficult results in frustration or anxiety. Another thing we're looking for in a good challenge for fun is incremental progression. We can maintain flow if the level of challenge rises as we become more skilled. Enjoyable challenges are going to involve this sense of steps up, allowing me to build confidence, slowly build skills over time. In our experiences and our products, when we're really in a fun, challenging state, this is achieved by gradually increasing the difficulty of the tasks, or perhaps introducing new challenges or new elements that then sort of disrupt our familiarity with the task, right? There's a sense of all of a sudden there's new information, or there's new patterns, there's a new barrier, there's a new challenge in place. And then I have to develop new strategies to overcome that. So incremental progression helps me maintain interest, helps me maintain motivation and curiosity. What's on the other side? Can I get over this next challenge? I get this constant sense of growth and achievement, keeping me engaged. Now, I said earlier, when I was looking at the picture of Go, I was visually overstimulated, certainly, but I don't know the goals and objectives of the game. I don't know the patterns. I don't know what the organizing principles of the game are. So challenges are going to be more enjoyable when they involve clear goals or objectives that give me a sense of purpose and direction. Now, the goals can be short-term, right? Like solving a small puzzle, reaching a checkpoint in a game, or it could be a long-term goal, completing the entire game, or getting up to a specific skill level, or completing a presentation, right, to give. Well-defined goals are going to help users measure their progress. It's going to help maintain their motivation and give them a sense of accomplishment. And we think about short-term goals, and we also have to think about the long-term goals. UX designers are always asking during interviews, what are you trying to accomplish? What solutions are in place that you use to accomplish this goal or this task? Right? And then we take those goals and objectives back to our teams, right? And we come up with a common understanding of what users are trying to accomplish. We start to understand the patterns at play here, the organizing principles around what users are trying to do. So I think of it this way. We're in a state of flow when we're fully engaged with what we're doing. And we can incorporate challenge into activities, products, games, experiences to enhance their enjoyability. But we have to think about balance. We have to think about well-balanced. It needs to be clear goals and objectives, and it needs to have incremental progression. A one-off challenge coming randomly in the middle of a product experience doesn't do much, right? There's no incremental progression to continue to draw the user in. So we're trying to create these experiences that are compelling, immersive, fun, and rewarding in some way. Okay, let's talk about patterns. This is one of my favorite subjects, is patterns of all types. Now, I said at the beginning that for something to be fun, you need patterns, but you also need to be able to disrupt those patterns. And that's where novelty comes in, right? There should be an element of novelty that disrupts my understanding of something every now and then, because I'll get bored. Now, as humans, we're like these voracious consumers of patterns. We're these little Pac-Men and Pac-Women, right? And we just, no, we eat these patterns all day. Our brains do it on autopilot. Sometimes they do it too much, right? And we see patterns that aren't really there, but our brains fill in the gaps. This is where we start to get conspiracy theories from, right? We see patterns that don't really exist. So let's work towards a definition of a pattern, just so we're all on the same page here. I think about a pattern as a sequence or an arrangement of elements that are recognizable and repeatable. Okay, I'll say that again. It's a sequence or an arrangement of elements that are recognizable and repeatable. These can be visual elements. They can be auditory elements. They can be any type of sense that you can imagine, right? But it has to be able to be recognizable and repeatable. And our brains are just naturally drawn to identify the patterns and then make sense of them. It's not enough just to say, oh, here's the pattern, I identified it. It's, what does the pattern mean? What's the meaning behind the pattern? How does it affect other things in the game? What is the relationship between this pattern and a different pattern? Can I tie the two patterns together? So incorporating patterns in a fun activity really can contribute to its enjoyability. Here's an example where you can't help it. Your brain is just going to fill in the gaps and predict what these objects are. It's going to fill in the gaps without you even telling your brain to do it. So this is called Gestalt psychology, the theory of Gestalt. Okay, I'm sure many of you have seen these images before when you're talking about visual design, visual composition, visual hierarchy, dominance, all the different principles of visual design. And of course, we get into all of that in our program on UI design. But you can't stop your brain from filling in the gaps and closing the loop of the pattern. Like I said, sometimes we see patterns, our brains, our neurons start to connect things that aren't actually there, okay? And it can get us into trouble sometimes, but it can also be highly rewarding. Yes, Yutzav, that is Jesus on the bread. It's not Jesus on the bread. To be clear, it's a random assortment of toasted particles, but your brain, Yutzav, basically cohered and pulled that together from your memory, from your experience to identify something that isn't really there. Okay, but it can be highly pleasurable too. This is the thing about like conspiracy theories and patterns and seeing Jesus in bread. It keeps us from being bored, right? Boredom is basically the brain casting about for new information, for new patterns to recognize. Like our brains want to have fun. So I was in the car the other day listening to some music, and a song came on. I think it was by Bon Iver, some artist like that. And I noticed this really interesting drum pattern. Do we have any musicians here? Wonder if we, okay, so Andrew, a couple of musicians, Brianna, nice. So if you're a musician or you're just a consumer of music, I guess, most of the music we listen to, at least in popular music, is going to be what time signature? Yep, of course, 4/4. What I noticed about this song is that there was a strange drum pattern that sort of disrupted my familiarity with music that I'm used to listening to on the radio. And I started trying to figure out, well, how are the vocals like layering on? I couldn't quite get the pattern, right? It didn't click the way 4/4 patterns do, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. So I started counting out, and I dabble in a little bit of music, so I know that there's different time signatures, etc. And it took me just a minute to figure out, oh, this song is in 5/4 time. And you know, for about 3 minutes, I just counted over and over again in the car. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3. I did it through the whole song because it was such a like novel pattern that I'm not used to listening to, you know, driving down the highway on a popular music station. So if you listen to jazz a lot or classical, lots of other different types of musics have wacky time signatures that are like amazing. They're wonderful. But most popular music is not. And maybe this just says something individually about me, and you all wouldn't do this. But the fact that I could recognize the pattern in 5/4 time gave me this pleasure. And that's why I kept repeating 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3. And I started to do this other thing where I was like, what other songs or what other things do I recognize in 5/4 time? And I was like, oh, a famous one is like what? The Mission Impossible theme. Dun, 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 dun. That's in 5/4 time. Da, 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 right? Okay, enough singing. But I started singing the Mission Impossible theme song over this. Okay, I'll move on. But I just found that really interesting that to pass the time, I found so much pleasure over just saying the numbers over and over because it was this novel pattern that my brain was just like feasting on, like a little Pac-Man. Okay, and visually we do this with our user interface design systems. So if you've been in design or you've worked in a design adjacent job or worked with designers as a software engineer, data scientist, product manager, marketer, anything like that, and you've worked with designers, you know that we usually have design pattern libraries or design systems that we use. And the whole point of using a system is that it's easier to teach your users to use your products if they can recognize the same patterns, right? It's teaching them through familiarity. And then every now and then, a designer might do something to intentionally disrupt what you're doing to keep you like interested. All of a sudden, your UI design shifts from 4/4 time to 5/4 time, okay? And that can look like a lot of different things, but a lot of times it's some simple idea of fun. It might be some gamification you introduce, trying to get people to adopt better, healthier habits and behavioral design. It can also be a simple reward. Content strategy plays into this as well. So Duolingo, right? Just getting the applause that you're continuing to learn a new language, right? So you're giving this feedback loop. You're giving these little rewards, these little, again, I say these little nuggets, right, of dopamine hits that are fun. Okay, but you can't do this over and over and over and over because then you get bored and it's like, oh, who cares? It's the cute little owl again. Right? You have to come up with new ideas and new ways to disrupt our familiarity with the 4/4 patterns of our products. I mean, does that resonate with any of you that like over time, you've just gotten kind of bored with seeing nicely designed apps or websites? Like it all starts to look the same. Pardon me. And then all of a sudden, something comes out of left field that just like disrupts. And we can come up with all kinds of different examples. And some of these things like take hold in our industries. So I saw someone talking about like skeuomorphism, glassmorphism, fixed navigation. I think Twitter, like, I don't know how many years ago it was, 7, 8 years ago, were I think the first ones to introduce that new pattern where you pull down to refresh, right? That's been used, like, it's just been an accepted design pattern now. Pull down to refresh. It didn't exist for many, many years. Yeah, micro interactions, that's another example. Okay. So what about immersion? What about story? It's getting back to this idea of fun. Now, bearing in mind all that we talked about before, we talked about challenge, we talked about patterns, disrupting patterns. Okay, what about the social component? Does anyone here play RPGs? Wondering if we have any gamers here. Yeah, Utsov, Stas, Sana, Roger, yeah. Darkest Dungeon. Okay, what are some of your favorite RPGs for those of you that play? I mean, Dungeons and Dragons, of course, is the classic, right? That's the. But tabletop RPGs have like taken off in recent years. And I'm not a big player of RPGs, but I do notice some like principles of fun here that we're talking about in terms of the appropriate level of challenge, storytelling. What's so interesting to me about role-playing games is that they are richly interpretable. This is not my word. I found it from some other game theorist, okay? And he said that because of endorphins and the pleasurable feedback we get, fun comes from situations that are richly interpretable. And I think that phrase, richly interpretable, was what led me to start thinking about RPGs, because that's like almost the definition of an RPG, is that you interpret the story. The story is emergent. So for those of you that aren't familiar with RPGs, I'm going to give probably a terrible definition of them, right? But it's a group. Well, it doesn't have to be a group. There are single player RPGs too. But a group gets together and they create this world together, or they interpret the world. I won't say they create the world, because a lot of times it's based on a core rule book or some type of world building that has already happened by people that are really experts at building worlds, okay? And they give you just enough so that you can then co-create or co-interpret the world. And what emerges is this like beautiful social story about how you interact and overcome challenges within this world, right? And I love this Willy Wonka quote, "The suspense is terrible. I hope it will last," right? And I love that our brains can fill in the gaps in these stories. There's an RPG that I found, I haven't played it, but it's called Alice is Missing. Chris, you recognize this, okay. I was boggled because this RPG only takes place over text. A group of people play out this situation of their friend gone missing, and it all takes place over texts on their mobile devices. That's how you interact. So that gives you an indication of how fun it is for our brains to generate and create and fill in the gaps of this world. If we can build a whole experience of fun and story over a text message thread, right? Imagine the possibilities that we haven't even yet fully explored when it comes to engaging in fun in our experiences and in our products. I find it highly fascinating that experientially, the designers of games like this are like tapping into some fundamental part of what it means to have fun and subverting some of our expectations. I'd never heard of a game that could only be played over text message, right? It's disrupting and subverting our expectations, the novelty of it. So brands do this. If I can kind of bring it sort of full circle back to like UX design and user interface design. When you think about what makes up a brand, insert any brand that you like, it doesn't matter. You're going to have these different elements, logos, art directions, content strategy and tone of voice, their visual design system, their overall strategy in the marketplace. And these brands come and bring these elements together and communicate something about the brand. So outdoor voices, for example, they use all these elements of color, their content strategy, their art direction, their videos, even their physical packaging, and their in-store experience, right, has this element of fun and recreation. So brands can use this too to sort of disrupt the norm. Okay, this is another brand. I can't even remember what this brand is called. Star something, I think. But I loved how just engaging their content was online, and their product packaging, their art direction and photography, right? Everything about them just communicates this idea of fun. So the last essential question, and let me look at my time here. Okay, I'm doing good on time. The last essential question that I want to think about is, how can we use challenge, patterns, disruption, novelty, social immersion, all these other elements? How can we use them in UX design? Right? I said at the beginning, my whole point of doing these sessions was so that I could look at other things that are happening out there in the world and bring some of those principles back into my own work. I landed on 4 things, I think, that fun can be used for as a UX designer. 1 is relieve constraints. 2nd, understand a problem. 3rd, change perspective. 4th, motivate. Okay. So let's look at what this is. By using fun in UX, we can generate out-of-the-box ideas by relieving constraints. Even if you're not a designer, think about your work that you do. Okay, there's constraints, right? Could be time, could be the software that your boss tells you have to use, could be how much a client is willing to pay for your services, right? There's all these constraints that exist. Sometimes it can be helpful to see things upside down or see them from a new perspective, right? So fun allows us to generate new ideas by saying, you know what, no constraints. Money's no constraint, time is no constraint. Now, it doesn't mean that the idea is going to launch, but that's not the point. Here's the point. Rather than starting with the obvious every time and trying to go straight to the innovative, what if we moved past obvious and started with the absurd? No constraints, go to the absurd. And then layer on constraints. That's an easier way to get to innovative thinking and innovative ideas than starting with the obvious and trying to get to innovative. Most people are only starting with the obvious, okay? You'll be an advantage if every now and then you have some fun. Be absurd, get rid of the constraints. The constraints will always come back. We all know this, right? Constraints will come back. But at least you have explored the outer wilds. Fun can also be used to understand a difficult space, problem space, or conceptual space. Now, I probably could have had fun by drawing or designing a concept map of fun, right? I found someone's example online of global warming, right? They were trying to understand the conceptual space of global warming. I could have done the same thing and mapped out all of the different relationships of fun. But I always remember a quote that I ran across. I can't attribute it to anyone. But that quote was, if you only see one solution to a problem, you don't really understand the problem. And I've included sketches here for a reason. Because I think it's important to get outside of the constraints of our digital tools every now and then. Get out of the spreadsheets, get out of the documents, get out of the design software of your choice, and get back to like the tangible feeling of pen on paper or marker on paper or paint on canvas or whiteboard, right? That embodied designing not only with your mind, but designing with your body as well. Embodied thinking, I think is the term, right? You're thinking with your whole self, not just the brain, not just the computer, right? You're thinking with your entire body, the muscles, the feedback that you get from the pressure of the paint on the canvas or the pen on the paper. There's something there, there's something fun about that. So we can explore conceptual spaces or problems that are difficult. And what this helps us do is to simplify or change our perspective. I love Picasso's series of bull drawings, because what he does is he slowly gets from more specific to more abstract, right? On the left, you have a very specific kind of bull. And as you move towards the drawings on the right, you get abstractions of the idea of a bull. It's no longer a bull with this fur or this kind of tail or this horn or this pattern or this marking. It's just the idea of bull, a vague line drawing of a bull. So this can change your perspective on a problem or a solution, right? By introducing this idea of fun and abstraction, simplify the complexity. The last one was motivation. Some of you talked about this: curiosity, engagement, motivation. There's a company called Brilliant, and I was just looking on their website because I really like their product. They teach you math and science through highly interactive and engaging lessons. You're not watching videos, you're actually like interacting with the animations and the content. And you're learning all of these really complex principles through these active, engaging lessons. And so I saw that they had a section of their website called Principles. And I love that their first principle was just excite. The greatest challenges to education are disinterest and apathy. And their second one is cultivates curiosity. Questions and storytelling cultivate natural curiosity are better than the threat of a test. So I think we can use fun as a principle to excite and cultivate curiosity in our customers and our clients and our users, whatever the domain is, right? It's not always just about the numbers. We need more clicks. We need more engagement. We need more downloads. We need move them through the funnel, move them through the customer loop, whatever it is, right? Sometimes it can just be about being human and tapping into a core part of the fun part of our humanity. And we can engage one another. And the relationship can, I think, be heightened. I think the relationship can be extended, and it can be more than just designer user. Me designer, you customer. Right? I think we can have a genuine connection by using some of these principles, but that requires adopting values and living out those values as a company, as a designer, as a product team, whatever you are. You have to live out those values and practice them. So I loved it. The first two were about fun. Okay, the last thing that I want to do is just have a tiny bit of fun with you. So do me a favor. If you've got a pencil and some paper, I'll give you just a minute. Everybody get a pencil and some paper. I'll give you just a minute to do that. This is so ridiculous and fun, but when you finish with it, you get this like nice little like, that's nice. All right, so if you've grabbed some paper, draw a 2x3 grid or a 3x3 grid, doesn't matter. So I'll give you a few seconds to draw that grid. Okay, now each box gets its own little squiggle. Don't think about it, okay? The whole point, get out of your head, just squiggle a little bit in each box. Different squiggle in each box. I'll give you a couple seconds to do that. And the last step, make each squiggle a bird and see what you get. This is the one that I did right here on the right. I absolutely was like, when I saw the squiggles, I was like, how's this going to be a bird? But then I saw all the different ways that I could make it a bird. And I got really excited. And I wanted to share it with you. Okay. I wish I could see all of your birds. I would love to connect and see what you've done. But if you didn't have paper right now, that's okay. Do this some other time and have a little bit of fun. Okay. That is all that I have today to wrap up on fun. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope that you got something to think about, maybe even something that you'll be able to bring back to your own work, your own life in some way. Again, these are not hard and fast rules. I am not an expert on fun or game theory or gamification or any of those things. But this is my little way of encouraging you to remember to look outside of your norm, look outside of what your normal everyday patterns are, and see if you can disrupt it every now and then with a little bit of fun, and elevate your work, elevate your relationships, and maybe elevate your customers' experiences, your team experiences by having that fun connection. Okay. With that, if there are any questions about Flatiron School or about our program, we are ready to answer them. We've got Michael, we've got some other people here that can help answer those questions. So toss questions in the chat if you want to hear anything about the program. We'll do our best to answer it with the time that we have remaining. If you're not interested in hearing about the program, you're welcome to head off. And again, thank you so much for coming today. Thank you, LaToya. Thank you.
Jan, all of our previous webinars, they're going to be hosted on our YouTube page. I can drop that link in the chat right now.
Wonderful.
Josh, I just want to let you know I really enjoyed that.
Oh, I'm glad, Michael. Thank you.
Thank you so much for presenting. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, that's an easy thing to present on. But it's interesting how often we neglect it, right, in our professional and even personal lives. So it was fun for me to talk about fun. Sean, let's see, you've got a question. Oh, Luma, thank you. Yes, keep drawing birds. I know, right? It's like you just infinite birds. Sean wanted to dive into the difference between a web app versus web content in terms of UX and UI. Sean, can you maybe rephrase that question just a little bit? Because I'm not 100% sure what you mean. I want to do a good job answering your question. web app versus web content. I understand that part. It's in terms of UX UI that I'm not quite sure what you mean. While you work on rephrasing that question, I'm going to jump to Alice's questions. How we're incorporating AI developments into the programming. Do you know, that's a great question. We actually have a working group now that is going through Flatiron's stance, our position on AI generative code and design. We are embracing the tools. I think we'd be fools not to. We're embracing the use of the tools, but we want to make sure that we're teaching you how to use the tools effectively. Just like any new technology, there are limitations. So we want to make sure that we fully explore those limitations so that it can be a useful tool to the learning experience, right? The last thing that we would want is for you to get through the program using a tool like ChatGPT, and then all of a sudden you're in a job interview where you can't use ChatGPT, and then you fail the interview, right? So I think we've got a working group now that is going through all of the the legal issues that come along with a technology like this, but also all of the interesting use cases, right? Because it does open up this whole other world of possibilities, not only with coding and design, content strategy and things like that. I would say no one's an expert at it yet, right? It's so new that most companies that have positioned themselves as experts probably don't really know what they're doing. It's a marketing thing. All they've done is use the ChatGPT API in their product. That doesn't necessarily mean they know what they're doing. So we want to know what we're doing, right? Because it's foundational and fundamental to the educational experience and our graduates getting a job. Okay, Sean. Thank you for rephrasing. An app developer in a network engineering space. The apps are technical and data-driven. Does the approach to UX and UI differ here from content-driven web design? Yeah, okay. Does the approach to UX UI differ from content-driven strategy? It does, yeah. A content-driven strategy would involve UX copywriters, it would involve marketing, it would involve heavy use of primary personas and user psychology, right? Trying to understand what motivates, what interests, what captivates your users, making sure that you're giving them what they need, what's useful to them for content. What you're talking about, right, a more technical or data-driven approach, right? It's not about the content, it's more about what is the user getting done with the software? What does the software make better for the user? What possibility spaces exist that you haven't explored yet as a product or as a product team? And tying that possibility space of what users are telling you and what users would like with the business strategy, right? Is this sustainable and viable? Do we have the technology stack to be able to execute on what users are asking for? Does it make sense financially, right, to sustain this? All of these questions. So yes, what you're talking about is, it would be different. A different approach that a UX designer would take for user research, but also for solutioning. It's a really good question.
Looks like there's also a question in the Q&A.
Excellent. Okay, thank you, Rika or Rekka. I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing that. UI and UX principles teach you that don't make users think. But today, what you said about disrupting patterns, which leads to making users think. What do I think about the dichotomy? So I would say it depends on the task that the user is trying to accomplish. There are many tasks that we don't want to think about. We just want it to work. And putting up any type of blocker or arbitrary constraint or barrier would be a poor user experience. It doesn't matter how cute, how fun, how colorful it is. There are certain things that we would not want to disrupt the user's experience with. But there are other cases where users are more open to a fun experience. So think about onboarding to a new product, a new app that you've downloaded, right? That is a chance to engage the user, to have some fun, to challenge them a little bit, to learn the interface, right? We challenge you, just downloaded a new app and now we're challenging you to input X amount of money into your account. Okay, so I think about Acorns, which is a financial app that basically takes care of the investing. Users don't have to really fool with it. They just tell them how they want the investments to go, and then the app takes care of it. It simplifies everything, right? So there are certain tasks that I do in my Acorns app that I don't want it shouldn't be fun. It's not going to be fun. I'm moving money between the checking and the retirement account, right? But there are times when Acorns has educated me using a disruptor. They've disrupted my experience in order to provide me more value. So what you've got to do is you got to weigh it on the scales and say, ultimately, if we disrupt the user experience, are we giving them something that is more valuable in the long run, right? Versus just disrupting for disruption's sake. So those are times when we don't mind disrupting the user experience because what we're trying to give them is long-term more valuable. And that might be new information. Maybe we've launched a new feature in our product and we believe strongly that this is going to improve your experience, right? So we're going to disrupt and get your attention with some kind of fun design idea. So yeah, that's how I would answer that. That's a great question. Thanks for calling that out. Don't make users think. That's a foundational book in the design space by Steve Krug, I think. The product designer course covers these differences. Sean, yeah, back to your earlier question. Yeah, we definitely do. We cover the difference between a content-driven strategy and a task-driven strategy in the course. Nova asks, what resources do you use for the UX design patterns and how do you gamify those patterns? Oh, that's a very long answer, and I won't go into a long answer. Here's what I'll say. Gamification works for a while, but it doesn't tend to be a long-term strategy. Some of you may remember when Grubhub first came onto the market, they were one of the first apps that I saw really gamify the user experience. For every certain amount of deliveries, you got to play a little game in their app. And at the completion of that game, sometimes you would get a reward. Sometimes you wouldn't. It was kind of like gambling, essentially, right? It could have just as well have been like, tap this button and roll the dice You might get some money, you might not. When Grubhub came out with that, there was all this kind of like talk about it. Like, oh, this is the next big thing. Gamify everything. Everything should be a game in the app. And a lot of app designers followed that. And it did not go well. People didn't respond very well to it. And in fact, within about 2 years, Grubhub got rid of that from their experience. I can only surmise that the trade-off was the value that users were getting was not high enough for it to be worth it. That kind of gamification is akin to gambling, okay? It targets the same quick dopamine centers of your brain to get you to come back quickly. I gotta come back, I wanna come back. It's the same reason why you refresh your Twitter feed or your Instagram feed or whatever, you pull to refresh and the thing like pops back on and it's like new content, wanna see the new content. Gamification can be really useful when it is a longer term strategy, okay? When it's not just about getting the user a small reward so that they hopefully come back in the next retention, right? That's why everybody launched gamification, was retention. Retention is just saying users that downloaded the app and have used it more than once or have used it X amount of times over a month or 2 months, okay? So the number is arbitrary, but that's what retention is. We're retaining users. So gamification that is aimed at only retention is like shallow gamification. It might work for a little while, but users are going to get bored with it. They're going to get annoyed, okay? And they're going to see past what you're doing, okay? Long-term, or what I would call deeper gamification, takes the long view of things and thinks about the customer life cycle in a more holistic aggregate manner. So a longer term, I think Acorn, again, to go back to Acorns, I think they do that very well because Acorns does gamify some things, but they only do it every now and then, and only when I am getting some type of really important information or new value. It's not just a one-time, here's $10, you know, next time you place an order, you might get another $10, but you probably won't. It's deeper than that. They're really thinking about the entire life cycle of being a new customer, being a middle-aged customer, and being maybe a late-stage customer. So to kind of tie all of that up, what it's doing is it's creating a relationship, a deeper relationship. And when you have customer trust, when you have users trust, you're not gamifying just to get them to like click, 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 or to pad your numbers. It is a mutual back and forth. We are gamifying this to give you value because we need your attention for this. This is important. That kind of gamification I can get behind, okay? Because all it's doing is it's disrupting the patterns that I'm used to say, hey, there's a deeper, more valuable thing if you do this. If you actually moved your money into this fund, let us tell you about what the returns would be, right? And it's fine if that's kind of gamified a little bit. To me, that's just using behavior, that's behavioral design, trying to make good habit loops. All right. Great question. Yeah, boy, I should just do a session on gamification though. That would be really good. Maybe
Noted.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, maybe we'll do one on gamification. There's a lot there, and that would be good. Okay. Well, we're 2 minutes over. So again, thank you all so much for spending this time, asking great questions and drawing birds. At the end of the day, you drew some birds, so you should be proud of yourselves. All right.
Thank you, Joshua, for hosting. And just to let everybody know, we're going to send out a recording of this event within the next 3 business days. So look out for that. And we hope to see you at our next event soon. Have a great day, guys. Bye.
Bye, everyone.